What's up guys, my name's Liam, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Edifier Hecate G3M Pro. This is a smaller budget gaming mouse with an incredible shape, but is this going to be the perfect mouse for you? Let's check it out. And before we get started today, I did want to let you know that this was sent out to me by metkeys.com, though everything you will be hearing in this video today are going to be my own words and my own opinions. Starting with the unboxing, here's what we're looking at. On the back, it does have some details. This does have a 300 milliamp hour battery inside. It is rated up to 70 hours of battery life and has a polling rate up to 1000 hertz. And inside the box, really easy to open up here. Here's the mouse sitting here at the top. Underneath, it does come with the dongle adapter. They do include you with this white USB-C cable, this instruction manual, and then you have this little plastic packaging right here, and looks like inside they just include some stickers, and this looks like it's just a manual for their product lineup, or excuse me, some type of a catalog for their products. Starting over at the bottom of the mouse, they just have a power button right here. Switch it down to turn it off, switch it up to turn it on. They do include storage at the bottom for the 2.4 gigahertz dongle. And then up here at the top, they do have this really cool, unique design. So what this function actually does is the switches on here, they seem like normal switches. And then once you do switch this up, the switches actually go into silent mode. So really cool stuff. You guys probably can't hear that very well right now, but I will throw up a sound test here shortly and we will go over that. And these are just the typical Teflon skates that come on these cheaper style mice, and they are a little bit slower. It does not feel like they've added any additional coating on here. The surface, it feels really smooth, just feels like a smooth plastic. So I'm sure this is just some type of a straight injection plastic mold. But aside from that, what I do want to say is, again, these cheaper mice, they just keep impressing me time and time again. This thing feels rock solid. The build quality is incredible, and I get literally no bend or flex or anything on this shell. Coming over to the switches, the implementation feels really good on here. If you guys can see, this does kind of have these comfort grooves on here to where it kind of sits up higher towards the scroll wheel, and the overall implementation, just a slight bit of pre-travel, but not a whole lot. And then after you actually click the switch, there's a little bit of post-travel, not too much, but once you do move closer up on the front of the switch, they actually feel really consistent. Usually when you come further up on the switch, I do feel like they bend down and make a lot more contact with the shell, but it does feel pretty consistent throughout. The click quality from front to back, it feels pretty good. Once you do get to this point right here and further back, I don't know too many people that grip the mice like that, but just figure out to bring these things up. It does get just a little bit harder to actuate the switch up there, but aside from that, it feels really good. The side-to-side play is pretty solid as well. You do get a little bit of movement there, but nothing too terrible. And there's not a whole lot of teetering going on the switch, especially with how the curved design is for the comfort grooves. On mouse button 2, same thing. A little bit of pre-travel, nothing too bad. These clicks do feel nice and snappy. They don't feel spongy or anything like that. So they've done a really good job on this. One thing that I do want to note is when you actually do activate the silent mode, it does completely eliminate all the pre-travel. And like I said, the pre-travel is not even that bad to begin with. But when you do go into silent mode, there's like literally no pre-travel and almost no post-travel. So it does tighten them up just a little bit more. The scroll also feels really solid. There's like no play left to right. The steps are a little bit on the lighter side. They're not as defined, but the scroll wheel doesn't feel loose or anything like that. It does feel nice and tensioned. And then the center scroll wheel button, it's pretty good. It's a little bit on the heavier side, but nothing too bad. And then coming over here to the DPI button feels really good, and it's nice and flush with the mouse there. It doesn't protrude out or stick up too much. So I never had an issue myself while I was using this in game where I was accidentally hitting it or anything like that. And probably the most impressive thing to me is the side buttons. They actually nailed the side buttons on here. I feel like they feel incredible. There's literally almost no pre-travel. There is a little bit of post-travel there, but it doesn't push too far into the shell. There's a nice solid stop back there. And the side buttons feel great. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of side play on them. And same thing with the front side button, very consistent. Very little pre-travel, almost none. There's a little bit of post-travel, but again, it does hit a nice solid wall in there. And like I always tell you guys, these cheaper mice, I usually complain about the side buttons, but they really did nail it on this mouse. And once again, I only have one copy here, so I can't speak for all of them, but this mouse is coming in at $39.99 on MetKeys.com, and it has pretty much near perfect build quality. So really impressed by how this feels in the hands and how it performs. All right, guys, so let's drop a sound test on the click performance and the overall sound of the build quality. When it comes to the weight and balance, it looks like on my scale, I got this coming in at approximately 63.2 grams. And they've even done an incredible job with the balance. It's got a perfect front to back. And even on the sides, it feels really consistent as well. The software is pretty easy to use. It was a little different from all the other things I've used out there. When it comes to the actual settings, this does allow you to change the bounce time, but I believe that the minimum increment that it did come in is it allowed me to drop it down to 4 milliseconds on the bounce time minimum. It didn't allow me to go any lower than that. There are these other options on here. I wasn't too clear on exactly what they were. They had this line correct and this wave correct. I did leave these disabled, but it does also allow you to adjust the liftoff distance. And once I set my DPI and leaving the pulling rate at 1000 Hertz, these are the settings I used and it felt pretty good. The firmware is listed as TE-Link. So I don't believe that I've ever used a mouse with this before, but in game, there's nothing that really stood out to me that felt like it was too concerning or troublesome. It played pretty well overall, especially in line with these other budget options. And when it comes to the shape, I have been really enjoying this shape. It is actually pretty close to the Razer Viper Mini. As you can see over here on the bottom, it does have these pretty aggressive curves. I do feel like the most narrow point is a little bit further facing forward, a little bit above the sensor there. And though the curves are a little bit aggressive, it does feel really natural in the hands. There's nothing that stood out to me that bothered me. I was testing this out with fingertip grip, and the sides on it, they do kind of curve out a little bit, but they are kind of higher up and it does feel a little bit flatter for the most part. I feel like every type of grip I used on here worked pretty well. Fingertip grip, relaxed claw grip. And even if you were to do some type of aggressive claw grip to where you're to grip this further at the front of the mouse, there's a lot of real estate there. And I feel like it did a pretty good job at accommodating just about any type of grip style that I threw at it. If you look over here on the side profile, it does kind of have this center hump and is a little bit higher up, but as you can see there, it's much flatter. And then it almost kind of has this little additional kind of rear hump sticking out there, the way that it goes kind of flat and then just all of a sudden kind of tapers off aggressively to the rear. But like I said, the placement of the side buttons, everything about how I held this in hands, the second I picked this mouse up, I just really feel like the shape felt great and it seemed to work out well for me. And if we were to compare it to something like the Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition at the bottom, like I said, it does have these aggressive curves. The overall grip width at the bottom of the mice, they're actually really similar to one another. I do feel like it does kind of flare out more aggressively to the rear on the G3M Pro, but like I said, they feel really similar in the overall size. The top profile, the way that they taper off to the sides, they feel about equally as wide as one another as well. So very similar feeling in the hands between both of these. And then lastly, coming over to the sides, I do feel like the front of the G3M Pro sticks up a little bit higher, but if you just look at the curve profile on the top of these mice, it could possibly feel just a little bit flatter here at the top of the G3M Pro, but at the end of the day, these two shapes are very similar to one another. right, and next up, when comparing it to the S450, same thing with these as well. They are pretty similar into the overall scale. I do feel like they both have pretty aggressive curves on the side, to where on the G3M Pro, they're just a little bit more towards the front. And looking at these from the rear, the S450 has a much more aggressive hump, and though it does taper off more aggressively to the sides, they feel almost about equally as wide as one another at the top of the mice, aside from the fact that the S450 has that much taller and more aggressive hump. And then finally, looking at both of these from the sides, I do feel like the G3M Pro does stick up a little bit taller towards the front of the mouse, but then on the S450 you just have this much more aggressive hump, and it does feel like a taller mouse in the hands when you're comparing it to the G3M Pro. All right, and then finally comparing it to the Attack Shark X3. Starting out at the bottom, I do feel like the curves on the G3M Pro are a bit more aggressive than on the Attack Shark, and the Attack Shark does feel like a little bit of a wider mouse at the bottom. And then coming over the top, the G3M Pro kind of has this flatter profile at the top, and it does feel wider at the top of the mouse, whereas on the Attack Shark, it's a little bit more rounded, and it does make it feel a little bit more narrow. And then finally, looking at both of these from the sides, I do feel like on the Attack Shark X3, it does stick up a little bit more, and you do have a little bit more of an aggressive top and mid hump there. But aside from that, the overall scale and size of these are pretty similar to one another. All right, guys, so that wraps things up on the Hecate G3M Pro, and I must say that I really am a fan of this mouse, and I really do like the silent switch function that they threw on here. I think it's a really cool feature, and I'm really impressed that they were able to do it while maintaining such solid balance. So if you are a fan of the Razer Viper Mini shape, I've had a very positive experience while using this mouse, and I would recommend checking it out. All right, guys, so if you have any questions or feel like I left anything out, please let me know down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed watching this video and you're interested in seeing more videos like this in the future, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel. I've left affiliate links for these mice down in the description below if you're interested in picking any of them up and supporting the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.